This lesson is using place value to round decimals. We're going to start with a little review. When we're rounding, if the number ends, and that means in the ones column, if the number ends in 1, 2, 3, or 4, we round down. If a number ends in 5 through 9, we round up. You need to keep that rule in your mind as we round. For example, in rounding the number 21, what we're actually doing is going to be rounding between 20 and 30. We can see very easily that 21 is closer to 20 than to 30. And the 1 is, as our rule said, we're going to round down. An easy way to think about this is we're rounding on our tens house. That's the number or the column that we're rounding to. Our 1 is our determining digit. That tells us to round down. And so our answer would be 20. If we were to round 46, again, we're thinking we're between 40 and 50. We're rounding to the tens house. Our 6 is our determining digit. The 6 is between 5 and 9, so we're going to round up. 46 is closer to 50. Now, please remember that when we round up, the number actually changes and goes up 1 digit. But when we're rounding down, the number that in the column that we're rounding does not actually go down. We're simply going to the closer 10. And so the 2 would not change. It stays the same. We're going to do a little practice on whole numbers before we get to decimals. So we decide what place value we're rounding to, and in this case I'd like to round to the nearest 10. And again, that would be this number. I always underline the number that I'm going to round. Then I look directly to the right. I draw an arrow. This is my determining digit. This is the number that I think that rule. 1 through 4, round down. 5 through 9, round 8. 7 tells us that we're going to round up. So our number as an answer will be 2,850. We've rounded up. If we take the same number, but this time we round to the nearest 100, that means we're thinking this number is between 2,800 and 2,900. I go to my hundreds house. My determining digit is the number right next door. It's a 4. That tells me I'm going to round down. My answer will be then 2,800. Every number after the 8 will become a 0 because we're closer to 800 than to 900. Now let's talk about place value in decimals because this is what we're really thinking about. Once we move below the decimal into the tenths house, the hundredths, or the thousandths, you need to remember that depending on the number of zeros in the word 10, 100, or 1000, that's how many places behind the decimal we're going. So let's do some rounding to the nearest tenth. That would be this place. The 8 is in the tenths house. Again, I draw my arrow to my determining digit. That's a 4. A 4 tells us we're going to round down, which means we'll make our answer 2 8/10. Because this is a decimal, we don't need to write the zeros where the 4 and the 7 are. We can simply drop them. If we were to round to the nearest hundredth, there are 2 zeros and 100. That means it's my second place behind the decimal. That's the 4 this time. My determining digit is the 7. 7 is between 5 and 9, so I will round up. My answer will be 2 85/100. Again, the 7 would become a 0 if we were doing whole numbers, but because we're doing decimals, it would become a 0 and we drop it. We don't need that 0. So 2 85/100 is our answer. Let's do a couple of more to practice. And the number 5 and 429 thousandths, we're going to round to the nearest tenth. Notice there's 1 0 in 10, so we're rounding to the 4's place. That's the tenths house. I draw an arrow to my determining digit. That's a 2. That tells us we're going to round down. So our answer will be 5 and 4 tenths. I don't need to write the zeros that the 2 and the 9 would become because this is behind the decimal and they're not really needed. So our answer is 5 and 4 tenths. In my next number, 5 and 429 thousandths, we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. There are 2 zeros in 100, so we go to the second place behind the decimal. That's the 2. There's my hundredths house. My determining digit is the 9. That tells me we're going to round up. So the 2 will become a 3. And my answer is 5 and 43 hundredths. Again, I don't need a 0 in place of the 9. I simply drop it. That concludes this lesson.